Well, in about an hour's time, Secretary Geithner, the Treasury Secretary that is, going to be back on Capitol Hill today. He's going to be grilled on the administration's regulatory overhaul plan. In advance of that, we take you to Washington, D.C. Peter Cook standing by to tell us, Peter, really, what do we need to listen for in today's hearing?
Well, we're going to be listening for a bunch of things. First of all, pushback against the administration's plan from Democrats and Republicans. But we're going to try and hone in on some specific issues right now that our viewers should be paying attention to. And joining me now is someone with a lot of experience in this area, David Nason. He's a former Assistant Treasury Secretary in the Bush administration, Managing Director of Promontory Financial. He helped write the Bush administration's overhaul of financial rules back in 2008. David, good to see you.
Thanks for having me.
You and I spoke before this plan was rolled out. Now you've had a chance to take a look at it. What surprises you?
I guess the thing that I was most surprised about is the relative power between what was proposed for the Federal Reserve and what was proposed for this Council of Regulators. The clear winner in this proposal is the Federal Reserve, and the Council of Regulators is essentially a coordinator that works with the Federal Reserve on these particular things. That was surprising to me.
And we've got pushback already from Democrats and Republicans who say, hey, we're not so sure the Fed deserves this kind of authority. How do you see this playing out?
Well, as I said, there's a lot of institutional reluctance to give this much concentrated power to the Federal Reserve. So I think that's why the Council of Federal Regulators was attractive to a lot of members in Congress. So I think they're going to be asking, can you do this with a council, or does it need to be a single regulator?
Let me ask you about the actual authorities the Fed would have under this plan. You've been able to look at this. This is substantial power for the Fed. It gives them new authorities, new powers, new capabilities that they've never had before, never been asked to do.
Yeah, I think what's really interesting about the proposal is that it actually calls for a fundamental shifting of how the Federal Reserve supervised banks. It used to be that the Fed focused on just the bank. Now it's looking at the entity as a whole and the financial system as a whole, and that is a very profound change.
And that includes affiliate subsidiaries overseas, a whole range of things, off-balance sheet?
Off-balance sheet affiliates, foreign affiliates, and not as they relate to the actual bank, as they relate to the entity as a whole. That is a very big change, and the Fed's going to have to make a lot of changes to get ready to make that kind of change.
What about the argument, we heard some of it yesterday and today, that if you give this power to a council instead, as some lawmakers are pushing for, that's somehow going to whittle this down. It's not going to be strong enough to be able to take the kind of decisive action against an institution considered too big to fail. If you separate it up among all those agencies, what do you make of that?
I think there's certainly something to concentrating authority in one particular entity. But remember, all of the powers that you're giving to the Fed, so they will now be the arbiter of monetary policy, they'll be the lender of last resort for the economy, and now they'll be the supervisor of all large and systemically important institutions. I think that's something that is going to give people pause, and that's something that will be the subject of a lot of debate.
Do you see right now, based on the tones we're hearing from Chairman Dodd, others, some Democrats pushing back on this is going to change?
I think it's going to evolve. I'm not sure exactly where it's going to go, because I do think there is something to giving this type of authority to someone that is actually responsible for it. So there is some attractiveness to doing it that way, but we'll see.
David Nason's going to stick with us as we head into this hearing with Treasury Secretary Tim Geithner. But Deirdre, we'll send it back to you in New York.
Peter, thank you very much.